It happened on a Wednesday, the kind of gray, dragging day where the clock feels like it's stuck in molasses and the hum of the overhead lights drones like a lullaby. Third period had just begun at Lincoln Heights High, a modest school nestled quietly among the sleepy back roads of Toledo, Ohio. The air inside smelled faintly of pizza grease and worn-out textbooks, the kind of scent that clings to old buildings and even older stories. Inside room 208, Mr. Nolan Peters, tall, 40-something, with a perpetually furrowed brow, was scrawling a complex calculus equation across the whiteboard with a fading red marker. The students sat in a silence not born of curiosity, but confusion. Mr. Peters was one of those teachers whose intellect couldn't hide his sharp tongue. His sarcasm was his second language, dry, constant, and often just a breath away from belittling. Some students found him amusing, others just endured him. He turned toward the class with an exasperated sigh, tapping the board twice. Anyone feel like using that brain of theirs? No hands moved, no eyes met his. The silence thickened. Then, the classroom door creaked open. In stepped Elijah Brooks, the janitor, a mop in one hand, dustpan in the other. He wore his usual navy blue jumpsuit, the fabric worn soft from years of labor. His boots were still dusted from the morning's rounds, and his salt and pepper beard framed a face lined with quiet wisdom. Mr. Peters glanced at him, then smirked. "Maybe Elijah here can solve it for you," he said with a chuckle. A few students laughed, nervously, uncertainly. It wasn't cruel on the surface, but it was there, underneath. The assumption, the insult, the way some people laugh, not because something's funny, but because they don't know how else to respond. Elijah paused in the doorway. He smiled gently, eyes calm and unreadable. Then he looked at the board. "That one?" he asked, nodding toward the equation. Mr. Peters raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Be my guest." What happened next felt like a shift in gravity. Elijah set his mop and dustpan aside, wiped his hands on a rag tucked into his belt, and walked slowly to the front of the room. The atmosphere changed, curious, uncertain, tense. He picked up the dry erase marker, steady and sure, and began writing, not with hesitation, not with guesswork, with clarity. His hand moved confidently across the board, step by deliberate step. "Now, the trick here," he said, voice smooth and warm like a late-night radio host, "is to not let the mess fool you. It's just chain rule, followed by some cleanup." The room had fallen completely silent. The kind of silence that doesn't just happen, it gathers. Phones began to appear, recording quietly. Eyes widened. A girl near the back whispered, "Wait, he's actually doing it?" Minutes passed, 5 of them. When Elijah capped the marker, the problem was solved, perfectly. The room was suspended in silence. Mr. Peters stood motionless. For once, he didn't have a single quip or clever retort. Elijah turned back to the class and handed the marker to the teacher. "Hope that helps," he said simply, before walking out. But something unspoken lingered in the air like dust after an explosion. The kind of moment that doesn't end when the person leaves the room. It echoes. That classroom didn't go back to normal, not that day, not ever. By lunchtime, the story had exploded across the campus. Within hours, everyone knew. The janitor had solved a calculus problem that left the teacher speechless. A video surfaced, filmed from the back of the classroom, showing Elijah's quiet command of the board, the students' stunned faces, Mr. Peters frozen at his desk. People whispered, posted, tagged, shared. He didn't even hesitate. Mr. Peters looked shook. Bro solved that like he was brushing his teeth. But some weren't surprised. Ms. Gardner, who worked in the front office, had once seen Elijah thumbing through a thick math textbook on his break. Mr. Lim, the chemistry teacher, had caught him reading a physics journal during a thunderstorm in the lounge. Even Mr. Consincade, the security guard, had once muttered, "That guy? Smarter than half the folks on staff." Still, few truly knew Elijah. He was the kind of man who moved through halls like a whisper, early in, late out. Floors gleamed under his watch. Trash bins never overflowed. He was courteous, quiet, and rarely looked for conversation. But something changed after that classroom moment. Something cracked open. Later that day, while Elijah was emptying trash in the faculty parking lot, a small group of seniors approached him, hesitant but determined. One of them, a girl named Tasha, asked the question everyone had been wondering. "Mr. Brooks, how'd you learn all that? The math?" He smiled softly, as if he'd been waiting years for someone to ask. "I used to teach it. Kind of. Back when I was in graduate school working on my PhD in applied mathematics." Their eyes widened. "Grad school? Seriously?" "University of Michigan," he said. "Full ride." Tasha's voice dropped. "So why are you here?" He looked away, quiet for a moment. The pause held the weight of 1,000 untold stories. "My mother got sick, real bad. She didn't have anyone else. I left school to take care of her, thought I'd go back." "Did you?" He shook his head gently. "Life had other plans. The money dried up. Jobs weren't easy to come by. This job came along. It had benefits. It was steady. I stayed." He didn't say it with bitterness. He said it like someone who had learned how to live with the choices life made for him. But still, it stung. That brilliance, that fire, reduced to wax in the shadows. "But I still love the math," he added. "Do a little every night. Keeps the brain sharp." The students walked away changed. The next morning, room 208 was packed before second period even began. Same desks, same dull lights. But something was different. Phones were out, not hidden. Students sat forward, expectant. Mr. Peters walked in, slower than usual. He looked smaller somehow, like a man aware that something had shifted beneath his feet. He barely started his lesson when there was a knock at the door. Principal Reddington stepped in, Elijah beside her. "Mr. Peters," she said gently, "some of the students requested that Mr. Brooks join class today." Requested was generous, more like demanded. The school's Instagram had posted the video. Local teacher forums were buzzing. The momentum was real. Elijah sat in the back, hands folded, quiet as ever. Mr. Peters pushed forward with the lesson, but the students weren't listening. Not really. They kept glancing back, waiting. And then it happened. A student, Jordan, raised his hand. "Mr. Brooks, can you show us how you do this?" Peters didn't object. He knew better now. Elijah approached the board again, but this time he asked, "What have you tried so far?" A girl near the front explained her steps. He listened, really listened, then gently guided her toward the right solution. A small adjustment, a shifted bracket, a graph sketched beside the math. The light clicked on. The class murmured in recognition. A few clapped, not to be sarcastic, but because they understood something they hadn't before. "Math isn't about speed," Elijah said softly. "It's about patience, and knowing that mistakes are part of learning." No one in that room would ever forget it. Unbeknownst to Elijah, the assistant superintendent had walked in halfway through. He'd seen the entire thing. By the end of the day, another video, this one shakier but no less powerful, hit the internet. By midnight, it had gone viral. The janitor had taught. The teacher had watched. The world was starting to take notice. And somewhere beneath the surface of that simple high school, something profound had awakened. This man is a genius. Why is he scrubbing floors instead of standing at the head of a classroom? This man has probably forgotten more math than I've managed to learn in a lifetime. Someone find him a teaching license and cut him a check. He belongs at the chalkboard, not behind a mop. Even a professor from Ohio State saw the video, retweeted it, and added, "This man clearly knows his stuff, would love to connect." Elijah Brooks didn't have Twitter. He barely understood TikTok. But his niece, Tamara, who lived 2 towns over, called him the minute she saw it. "You're famous," she said, laughing. "You broke the internet, Unc." He chuckled softly. "I just helped a few kids understand a problem." "No, Unc," she insisted. "You don't get it. This is big." And by morning, it was. The district office received over 50 emails overnight. Reporters began calling the school for statements. Teachers who had barely acknowledged Elijah's presence were now suddenly offering him coffee in the lounge. Dr. Miriam Voss, the assistant superintendent, called an immediate meeting with Principal Reddington. "Why is this man not teaching in a classroom?" she demanded. Principal Reddington looked uncomfortable. "He applied years ago," he explained, "but he didn't have all the required credentials at the time. We kept him on because he was reliable, always dependable." Dr. Voss looked out the window at a crowd of students still buzzing about the video. "Well," she said quietly, "maybe it's time we reevaluate that." What neither of them knew, what no one at the school knew, was the full, winding story that led Elijah Brooks to where he was now, and how close he had come to being someone entirely different. The following Monday, Elijah arrived at school as he always did. Early, unnoticed, head lowered beneath the same navy blue uniform, clutching a well-worn thermos filled with black coffee. But something had shifted. Students nodded respectfully when he passed. Some smiled, awkwardly, like they didn't know quite how to speak to him, but wanted to. A few teachers waved. Some tried too hard. Others looked away, unsure how to reconcile the man they'd overlooked for.
Years with the one they'd just seen on screen. Mr. Peters, a teacher who once made a flippant joke at Elijah's expense, offered a tight-lipped nod. But what Elijah didn't expect was the envelope taped to his locker that Friday morning, an official school letter bearing the Lincoln Heights seal. "You are cordially invited to speak at the Lincoln Heights High School Career Day." He read it twice. It wasn't a joke. Later, Principal Reddington stopped him in the hallway. "We'd love for the students to hear your story," she said. "Your real story?" He hesitated. "You sure?" She nodded. "More than sure." When career day arrived, Elijah didn't wear his custodian's jumpsuit. He arrived in a faded brown blazer and slacks, still holding the sharp memory of an old crease. Clothes he hadn't worn in over a decade. The auditorium was nearly full, mostly juniors and seniors. Teachers lined the walls. Some students came expecting a math lesson. Others were simply curious, drawn in by the viral video. But what they heard was something deeper, something raw. Elijah stepped up to the microphone, took a breath, and began. "My name is Elijah Brooks. I'm 57 years old. I've worked here for 11 years. Some of you know me as the man who mops your floors and empties your trash bins." He paused. "But before that, I was a student, just like you. I grew up in Lansing. My mother raised me alone. I never knew my father, but I had a gift. Numbers came easily to me. I earned a full scholarship to the University of Michigan. I almost completed my PhD." He spoke of tutoring athletes to pay rent, of late nights solving complex equations, of professors who said he had something special. He spoke of dreams, of one day teaching, researching, giving back. Then he told them about the phone call that changed everything. "My mother had a stroke. I was in the middle of a final. I walked out that day and never returned." He didn't sugarcoat the rest. He told them about caregiving, about savings that evaporated, about the brutal truth that the job market rarely cares for personal circumstances. "I applied to Lincoln Heights, not as a teacher, but as a custodian. I needed steady hours. I needed insurance." He looked out at the students, letting the silence speak. "I told myself I'd stay just a few months, but time slips by when you're surviving." The room was still. No one moved. His words hung in the air like truths too long buried. "But I never stopped learning," he said. "I never let the work leave me. What left was how people saw me." Tears welled in the eyes of students. Some teachers bowed their heads. "And if there's one thing I want you to take from this, just one, remember this. Just because someone cleans your classroom doesn't mean they couldn't teach it." The applause was thunderous. But while students clapped, someone else was already typing an email that would change the course of Elijah's life once more. By Monday, the school felt different. There was a new kind of energy, quieter, deeper. Students weren't just talking about Elijah anymore. They were talking about the people they passed every day, the janitors, the cafeteria staff, even each other. Mr. Peters knocked on the custodial break room door that afternoon. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, eyeing Elijah's peanut butter sandwich. Elijah gave a quiet nod. "I owe you an apology," Peters began. "I made a joke. It wasn't funny. Truth is, I didn't expect you to know the answer. And that says more about me than it ever did about you." Elijah nodded. "I've heard worse, but thank you." Then Peters asked the question Elijah hadn't dared let himself consider. "You ever think about teaching again? For real?" Elijah hesitated. "I never stopped wanting it," he said. "I just stopped believing the door was still open." Later that week, Dr. Voss summoned Elijah for a meeting. This time, he wasn't there to clean up a mess. She smiled. "Mr. Brooks, we'd like to support you in completing your teaching credentials. We'll sponsor the process, provide guidance. You've already done the work. We just want to make it official." Elijah sat in stunned silence. "Why now?" he finally asked. "Because it's the right thing to do," she said. "And truthfully, it should have happened a long time ago." The process wasn't instant. There were courses, paperwork, reviews. But momentum had its own kind of gravity. Students started a petition. It passed 1,000 signatures in 3 days. Even the school board stepped in to push for fast-track approval. Elijah went from being invisible to indispensable. The school board meeting was held in the Lincoln Heights Gymnasium because, for the first time in years, they needed more chairs. Students held signs. Parents clutched transcripts of his speech like sacred texts. Teachers stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting. Dr. Voss took the mic. "We are gathered to vote on a proposal that speaks not only to this man's future, but to who we are as a district, who we want to be. The motion is to grant Elijah Brooks a permanent position in our mathematics department, pending completion of certification, which this board will support and expedite. The vote? Unanimous." The crowd erupted. Students leapt to their feet. Parents wept. Mr. Peters stood and applauded, eyes fixed on the man who had redefined dignity in the halls they all thought they knew. Elijah remained seated for a moment, eyes closed, breathing in the moment he had almost convinced himself would never come. Then someone handed him the mic. "I used to believe I missed my chance," he said, "that life had chosen a path for me, and I just had to accept it. But sometimes, your moment isn't lost. Sometimes it's simply waiting for everyone else to catch up." He smiled at Tamara, who stood in the back, capturing it all on video. "I'm grateful for every hallway I cleaned, every trash bin I emptied, not because I loved it, but because it taught me how to carry myself when no one was looking." He turned to the students. "For those of you who feel invisible, maybe you don't speak the loudest, maybe no one knows your story yet. Don't count yourself out. Life has a way of circling back when you show up fully as yourself." And to the teachers with a quiet grin, "Don't assume the man with the mop can't do the math on your board." Laughter echoed, light and healing. That night, Elijah walked out, not just as a custodian, but as a reminder to an entire community. Greatness doesn't always come dressed in authority. Sometimes it walks quietly in work boots, carrying a lifetime of wisdom, and just waits to be seen. This story moved you. If it made you think twice, share it. Ask someone you've overlooked to tell you their story. You might be surprised what's waiting to be heard. And if you are the one feeling unseen, keep showing up. Your moment might be closer than you think.